Today we will be comparing and ordering fractions. Please copy down the standard benchmark indicator on a clean page in your math notebook. The student will compare and order a set of fractions. Exploring, comparing, and ordering fractions. Here are some rules to help you compare and order fractions. Rule number 1. If two fractions have a numerator of 1, the fraction with the lesser denominator is greater. So, if you look down at the example, they have 1/2 and 1/3. Since 2 is smaller than 3, that means whatever you're dividing up, you're dividing into fewer pieces, so the pieces are bigger. So in this case, half of something is bigger than 1/3 of something. For rule number 2, if two fractions have the same numerator, the fraction with the lesser denominator is greater. Again, this is because whatever you're dividing into multiple pieces, if you're dividing it into fewer pieces, you're getting bigger pieces. So 2/7 is bigger than 2/8. Rule number 3, if two fractions have the same denominator, the fraction with the greater numerator is greater. So if 3/5 of something is greater than 2/5 of it. Comparing and ordering. Sometimes it is necessary to compare or order fractions. One way to do this is to write each fraction so that they have the same or a common denominator. For example, the fractions 4/10 and 8/10 have a common denominator, tenths. So for example 1, we need to find a common denominator for 3/4 and 2/3. One way to do this is to list the multiples of both denominators. So we listed out multiples of 4, so we have 4, 8, 12, and 16, and multiples of 3, 3, 6, 9, and 12. So the lowest common multiple is 12, so a good denominator to use would be 12 because it's the lowest common denominator. So for the try it, we need to find a common denominator for each one of these numbers. So for A, we have 1/2 and 3/5. So we're going to write out each of those numbers so we get our common denominator. And we can see right there that the first common denominator we're going to get is 10. For B, we have 3/4 and 1/7. So again, we're going to write out our common multiples until we find one that is the same on both lists. And we can see right there that 28 is our first common denominator. For C, we have 4/10 and 3/8. So again, we're going to write out the multiples till we hit a common denominator. And 40 is the first common multiple, so it's going to be our common denominator. For D, we have 7/10 and 2/3. So again, we're going to write out the multiples. And for a least common multiple and a common denominator, we get 30. For E, we have 3/4 and 3/10. So again, we're going to write out the multiples. And we get 40 for our common multiple, so it's our common denominator. So for F, we have 11/20 and 9/15. So again, we're going to write out our multiples. And we get 60 as our common denominator. For G, we have 3/8 and 1/9. And we get 72 as our common denominator. For H, we have 4/5 and 3/4. So we get 20 as our common denominator. Finally, for I, we have 5/12 and 7/8. So we get 24 as our common denominator. For example 2, we need to compare 3/4 and 5/6. So write the fractions using a common denominator, and then you can compare. The other way to do it is to use what's called cross multiplying, and you can use whichever method works the easiest for you, and I will show you both as we go through the problems here. So for J, we have 3/12 and 5/12. They already have the same denominator. We know that 5/12 is greater. For K, we have 1/6 and 1/4, and if we go back to our rules from the beginning, we know that if two fractions have the same numerator, the smaller denominator is actually a greater fraction. So we know 1/4 is greater than 1/6. For L here, we can do it one of two ways. We can find a common denominator, which would be 6, and create two equivalent fractions for each one and compare them. Or we can do another method called cross multiplying. This is where you multiply the numerator of the fraction on the left with the denominator of the fraction on the right. So 2 times 2 is 4, and we're going to put the 4 above the 2/3. Then we're going to multiply the numerator of the fraction on the right, so 1 times the denominator on the left. So 1 times 3 is 3. We're going to put the 3 over the 1/2. You always put the multiplication answer, the product you get, above the fraction whose numerator you used. So in this case, 4 is greater than 3, which means 2/3 is greater than 1/2. The other way to look at this is to find the common denominator, which we already said was 6. So we're going to change both fractions into 6. And there you can see 2/3 is 4/6, while 1/2 is 3/6. So again, 4/6 is greater than 3/6, so 2/3 is greater than 1/2. For M, we have 3/8 and 3/4, so we know fractions with the same numerator, the lesser denominator means the fraction is greater. So we know 3/4 is greater than 3/8. For 9/10 equals 4/5, it's very easy to get 4/5 up to tenths. So we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2 to get 8/10. Which means 9/10 is greater than 8/10, so 9/10 is also greater than 4/5. For O, we're going to use the cross multiplying method this time. So 5 times 8 is 40, and we're going to put that above the 5/12. And then 3 times 12 is 36, so we're going to put that over the 3/8. Which means 5/12 is greater than 3/8. And if you put them both in a common denominator of 24, you'll see that as well. For P, we have 3/6 and 1/2, And if we simplify 3/6, we divide the numerator and the denominator by 3, we get 1/2, so we know they're equal. Finally, for problem 2, if we use the cross-multiplying method, we have 5 times 3 is 15. We're going to put that above the 5/8. And then 8 times 1 is 8. We're going to put that above the 1/3. So we know 5/8 is greater than 1/3. We can also prove this using a common denominator of 24. So for the 5/8, we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 3, so we get 15/24. For the 1/3, we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 8, so we get 8/24. And as you can see, the 15/24 is greater than the 8/24. So it's the same steps. Whether you do it using the cross multiplying or you find the common denominators, you will get the correct answer either way.